of looking at university technology, there are a couple of aspects. Actually, at Diamond Head, what we had done is created this ecosystem which comprised of leading university professors. Then we had about 30 corporate executives. So these are CEOs and CTOs of large high-tech corporations who have a very good view of what realistic. Because one of the challenges from university deals is these professors are looking 5-10 years ahead. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is not so far ahead of the market that you will be kind of wasting your time waiting for market to arrive. So the critical thing is trying to take something out when markets are about to happen. You don't want to do it after markets have happened, then you've lost your edge, but you don't want to do it 4 years in advance also. So what we basically, the way I look at this problem is kind of a combination of getting view from leading university professors. And the professors I work with are people who are not just pure academics. These people have one foot on the commercial side also. For example, Hector Garcia Molina at Stanford, one of the leading professors in the database software engineering side, also sits on board of Oracle, has a very good view of the world from the commercial side, market reality. Then take that idea to our university professor. And my experience was that 90% of the ideas I introduced to my corporate advisors, they rejected as too early. That's a good idea. First of all, it can't scale. You can make 5 prototypes, but you can't produce it in millions. And the second one is, there's customers are not ready for this thing maybe 3 years later. So kind of combination of those two. And then the third leg was the corporate partners. So going to Suns and Oracles of the world and try to kind of get a feel from them. Is that a white space that they are interested in? Would they be interested in becoming an OEM partner if something like this happened? Or go to Fujitsu, get view from them about the Japanese market, or TeliaSonera about Scandinavian market. And once all those things are kind of satisfied in terms of from a timing perspective, then kind of work with the professors and or graduate students and understand one thing up front. Do you want to be king or you want to be rich? In the sense of, are you willing to work with us to bring in experienced startup executives who know the business side of it, marketing side of it, because we're working with you for your technology expertise and your kind of skill set there, not for your ability to create companies. So it's really the combination of the two. And I've had occasions where I would work with a professor who basically brilliant but refuses to let us bring in a CEO, wants to run the whole show, and that somehow is not likely to work out.
Now that sounds like, I think what you described before, really sort of the training ground for being a venture capitalist and viewing these companies at Stanford when you were there for 16 years looking at a lot of different companies. Do you have any war stories to share or anything sort of interesting? I think you talked about knowing early on the team, the husband and wife team that founded Cisco, and you ended up being in covering networking type things. Any other sort of story that sort of to you defines how an idea becomes a company?
Oh God, I mean, clearly Sun had just left Stanford before I joined Stanford in 1984. Actually, it was very interesting. I consider my Stanford experience was training ground for 2 reasons. One is because of where I was. Every startup in those days in Silicon Valley, first door they knocked on was at Stanford, because we are crazy. We always wanted to play with new technology. So anybody wanting to start a company would come to us first and say, I have this idea. Would you be willing to kind of try it out? And in many ways, actually, I equate that experience to being a venture capitalist, because I was being approached for thousands of different ideas. And I had to decide which 3 or 4 I'm going to spend my time and money with. And in many ways, that's what VCs do. So I'll kind of find things that made sense, kind of get engaged with them and try to deploy them in Stanford infrastructure. And I've seen actually a lot of areas. I think one of the key things I found, especially with the university technologies, a lot of times professors are used to being kind of telling everybody else what to do versus kind of being in a situation where a CEO who they doesn't know as much about technology but knows more about how to build a company, kind of telling which way to go. And the other thing which has been a big struggle, which I try to watch out for, is what I call is going for perfection versus 80% is good enough. A lot of times I think professors have a tendency never to stop developing the product. for a company, you have to decide at some stage, this is good enough for the market, let's freeze it here, get it out to the market, get customer feedback, and then we will come up with the next version, versus saying, oh no, I can do this, and never wanting to freeze. So that's the second aspect. And the third aspect is I always try to bring in a VP of engineering who has successfully delivered products that have worked well in the market. Because a lot of times graduate students and others are very good at building a quick prototype and demonstrating the capability, but where they lack the experience is building a scalable product that maybe it's going to work for 100 users, but would also scale to millions of users. So there is, I think, combination of the two. So there's a discipline that you learn over years. So I've had, like during my Stanford days, many companies where the code that were originally built by the academic team demonstrated all the functionality, but when it was out in the customer situation, a lot of things broke, and you really had to bring in people who had a lot of experience building products, come in and kind of re-engineer those.